We are glad that we could bring you back. We thought we lost you for good, so I'm glad you are back. Over to you, Mishti.
Thanks, Sam. I'm so glad we didn't we still have this opportunity to understand all the fantastic insights and the learnings from his leadership journey, from President Mokadi's leadership journey. It's truly inspiring. So on that note, you've done a lot of consulting work with organizations as well around culture. And I was reading a bit about that. In fact, you also use a tool on shaping organization cultures, where you map the gap from the current culture to an ideal culture. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more about that process and how coaching plays a role to help organizations come together to align to an ideal culture, and how can coaching and mentoring help them?
Thank you, Coach Mishti. I think let me start by apologizing for this mishap. IT can sometimes play games on one, and I think I'm a victim today. That said, I think we generally find ourselves in multicultural environment where there is always more than one culture that's prevailing. But if you look at it from an organization point of view, I think there are two things that I want to share. The one thing being that when we go to any organization, we come with us, our own experiences and personal cultures. But then as we enter through the gates of the organization, I always say, forget that you brought your own culture and start adapting to the organizational culture. Because if we don't do that, unfortunately, chaos might prevail, where you would find that John is advancing his own culture at the detriment of the other colleagues. So having an understanding of what the prevailing organizational culture is becomes important. You are talking about processes. I think the first process would be to identify what are the prevailing cultures within an organization, and how do we then ensure that from the prevailing ones we find one common one that we can all subscribe to for the sake of the organization, but also for the sake of the stakeholders that are linked to the organization in question. So what are the dynamics with the current, and how do we then shape that into the ideal culture that would be beneficial for the organization? That would be the process in a nutshell.
Will the prevailing culture be equivalent to dominant culture?
Well, I would want to suggest yes, the prevailing one might be dominant, but and I'm using the word might with reservation. If it is dominant and people are subscribing and embracing that culture, there are no issues. But if it is dominant and there are issues attached to it, that's when we need to be looking for the ideal conducive culture that is for the benefit of all the stakeholders.
So coaching must be playing a vital role there, helping people also, let go of their implicit biases and the culture that they are bringing to the organization and align to a common culture, common ground. Am I right in saying that?
You are right, Coach Mishti, in that coaching plays a very pivotal role in actually engaging the coachees who might be stakeholders on themselves, and getting them to grapple with issues that are there relating to the culture itself and finding a culture that works for them. And I believe that through coaching intervention, that is possible, yes.
Let's follow that up with you and your journey in the COMENSA community. I was there the day when you got elected. I didn't know that that was going to happen, but it appeared to be, for me personally, a historical moment on that day. I still have the pictures I took with you because it was celebratory in a sense because, we are in South Africa and we have to acknowledge that certain things used not to happen, and whenever they happen, sometimes you don't know how far to celebrate because some people will say, you must stop celebrating the first black this, the first black this. We are, since 1994, we are now one rainbow nation. But I'm gonna put it bluntly to say that we can't ignore the fact that like all other organizations in South Africa, COMENSA also had to experience the moment of the first, and the first being you. And how did that come about, and how did you experience it? Is this putting pressure on you? Is it putting too much expectations on people? Is COMENSA having within its own strategy a program of transformation and change? Not to lament the past, but to be relevant. So I asked so many questions once because I want to give you enough time to sort of like tell the story from that perspective.
I think we can start with the historical moment and the experience at that time. That how was the experience while that happened, and the journey.
Well, I still remember it was on the 22nd of May in 2019. And we were somewhere in Sandton, to be specific. I think it was a humbling experience. A humbling experience in the majority of the votes that were casted in my favor. And I think reality hit home immediately when the results were announced, because then I started grappling with the task ahead. I don't play racial cards, Coach Mishti and Coach Sam. I think for me, what is fundamental is the need to put an organization at a transformational path and start looking at issues that might be there that needs to be engaged, and not only engaged, that we need to find a strategic way of dealing with those issues. So from 2019 to date, there has been a number of interventions. And let me be on record as saying, alone I would not have done what I think we have done to date. There are always colleagues that you rely on in ensuring that what we are expected to do gets done. Perhaps it would also help that I give a quick background on how COMENSA operates. It is a national a professional organization that is run by myself and fellow board members. But we are assisted by chapters, and to date there are 4 active chapters within COMENSA in the 4 provinces, being Gauteng as number 1 with the majority. I would even say about 64 or 65% of our membership are in Gauteng. Then followed by KZN, then Western Cape, and Limpopo, own rights. And you can imagine when you run a professional body with volunteers, the best you can do is to appreciate the role that they are playing, in ensuring that the organizational objectives and aims continues to be relevant for the members themselves. Let me put also on record that while I appreciate that the current economic challenges in our country are such that where you find a volunteer having two conflicting priorities, the possibility of the volunteer giving a priority to personal priorities first does exist. But having said that, let me also be on record as saying we continue to appreciate what volunteers within COMENSA are doing. They're doing fantastic work in availing their time, in some instances availing their own resources for the benefiting Coach Sam. I think let me start first by saying, yes, we do have a transformation policy that is required, obviously, by South African Qualifications Authority, or SAQA for short. They always make sure that the transformational imperatives are adhered to. Rome was not built in a day. Maybe I need to add that statement. But I'm also happy to say, from a transformational perspective, I'm starting to see things that suggest that, yes, we're heading to the right direction. We might not be there, but we are in the process, and the destination is much shorter than we anticipated when we came into the office. That it is common, especially within COMENSA, that the majority of coaches are women. It does not take away the fact that because they are in the majority, the expectation obviously would be that they would also be influencing the direction of the organization. I have with Mishti, who is a colleague, who is also a friend. But as you can ask her, there are times where being a friend is another issue when we have strategic issues that we need to be dealing with. And we're working very well together in ensuring that COMENSA remains a professional body that most people aspire to be. Do we have other challenges that possibly needs to be addressed? Yes, we do. One of the key risks that we have is relying.
Before you go there, Mokadi, I'm going to come there. I want to take you back a little bit because we mustn't rush through this one.
Do.
It's not everybody that gets to experience how you are ushered into a leadership role. So I really want you to share with the listeners and the viewers, because people might take it very lightly that anybody can just stand up and then be a candidate and then we pass the vote and then he's in the office. It's a very delicate thing, personally, from my view. So who came to you and say, Mokadi, we feel that we need you to stand up for election to become the president of COMETSA? Because I'm sure as members, we first had to get your approval to say, yes, I'm ready. Who came to you and how did that happen? Just for the experience out there, because this is a body that anybody can stand up to become a member, and I think everybody should if they feel they are ready. But it will be wonderful from a mentoring perspective to share with us at what point did it start and you might have not taken it serious, but at what point did they start, and what did they say they saw in you that made you say, okay, I will go for it?
Thank you, Sam. I'm happy to share those experiences. But let me first start by sharing the process. The process of election is such that you would be nominated. I'm not going to say who nominated me, but I'm going to say you do get nominated. And once you are nominated, they will seek your consent and approval so that if you are ready to stand, you sign off the nomination form. So it would be the signature with the name of the person that would have nominated you. That then comes to you where you are informed that you have been nominated. Are you ready to serve? Your signature becomes confirmation that, yes, I am ready to serve, and therefore I am giving you the consent with the proviso that I know these are elections. It might not be me, it might be someone else. So what then happened was that it was not only me. I remember when I was elected, there were three of us who were equally nominated and gave consent. And out of the three, it so happened that on that day where you were there, Coach Sam, I was elected with quite a number of votes, I must say. How did it happen? It happened from a context, maybe this context might also help others. I was the company secretary at the time of the elections. And being familiar with the governance processes within the organization, including being familiar with the strategic goals that were there that we needed to achieve as an organization, I felt quite comfortable that I was ready. And I still want to go back and say, when that election took place, it really reminded me in a humbling way that determination to be wise can be the starting point of really one becoming wise. Because now I am entrenched in the day-to-day roles and responsibilities of running this professional body. So to your question about how I felt, yes, I was humbled, but being humbled alone was not enough. It meant the next day hitting the ground running, because we also had a conference that was taking place at the time. So the next day it was like hit the ground running. Of course, you have a colleague, you have your predecessor who then works with you to ensure that there is a handover. And it is after the handover that you start saying, guys, this is how I'm seeing it. You don't impose. You bring your own ideas to the table, and those ideas are interrogated for the benefit of the organization. That would be the experience that I would want to share. Yes, to your question, that one was, and it always would be in the history of the organization, that on the 22nd of May, 2019, I so happened to be the first. And that would be a part of the history. But again, let's be careful. Let's be careful in saying being the first should also bring with it the opportunity to make a contribution. And I think it is the contribution that I am making. I can also add, Sam, if I may, that the fact that after completing my first term, I am now into my second term, can only be a testimony of one thing or the other. And I will leave to you guys to make a judgment on that. But the truth is, we're going somewhere, and we're going somewhere very fast. I believe we're not far off from where we are going, despite the challenges that are there that I have already explained. But COMENSA remains a professional body that you would want to associate with. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm grateful that you are not the first member. You are the first in the leadership role. There are lots of great members within COMENSA with all different cultural backgrounds who are equally so qualified and able to play that role. I don't think, it's a dynamic of a society we live in. And many of us have experienced this situation where we ourselves, because of being conscious of our dynamics of politics, when the people they say the first, you always think that it's like they're saying you're riding on this race card, but you don't go by. That's not really to say that. As change agents, I think we need to enable our organizations and our society to be able to talk about these things openly without really making them main issues. But there are issues that can blind us. So thank you very much for saying that, because if you didn't become the first, we will still be saying, when is the first? So at least we've gone past that, we can work now. Anyway.
Along with the first, Sam, if I may add.
I think, Mishti, you want to share your a neutral perspective there from a diversity and inclusion point of view.
Yes.
You and I will talk about these things a lot. In South Africa, it just happens that race tends to become a predominant aspect of diversity, but it's not the only one. It's not the only aspect of it.
Yes. Thank you, Sam. I also wanted to add what I was saying earlier. It's not also just about being the first. I noticed this wonderful characteristic or capability of sustenance, be it being in an organization for 19 years and then going on to the second term in this organization as the president. And so that again speaks a lot about leadership, and not just leadership, but sustainable leadership. So I think I would want to really appreciate that aspect of it. And since we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, since President Mokadi also spoke about that, it was not about talking about the racial card. So those aspects, not touching about that. But something very interesting that Mokadi, you spoke about, that there are a lot of women coaches in the organization. So they have a natural influence. So typically, that's a challenge that a lot of organizations have, to create a gender balance or gender neutrality. But here you have gender diversity already in the organization. So if you could tell us a little about gender diversity in the organization and how women are leading, and as a leader who's creating a precedence of sustainable leadership, what is it that you would want to say about that?
Yeah, perhaps let me start by saying inclusivity is one of the values that we embrace as COMENSA. Having said that, the aspect of inclusion naturally follows. Let me give an example with our existing board membership. There is currently 7 of us who are serving as board members. Out of that 7, currently the 4 are women. And for me, that says a lot about the current situation as we look at it, where 4 out of 7 are actually women. So we need to appreciate the fact that we are obviously mindful of the importance of women being in the leadership of the organization. The aspect of equality comes from a number of perspectives. You can look at it from a point that says In South Africa, for example, there has always been a focus on women and youth, both in terms of development and empowerment. And if you look at that, I think within the existing board, we do have two fairly young women. And for me, I think it's important that I highlight that. I don't think we have issues when it comes to equality. And I'm saying we don't have issues in that it is not about your color of skin. It is about competency associated with what we expect you to do. If you are able to tick those boxes on that basis of competency and capability, you are well on your way in serving COMENSA without necessarily saying we look at your color and so forth. That would be my comment on that question.
Please share with us some aspects of your program of action within COMENSA, and perhaps also just the specifics that each of the chapters are currently driving for the coaches that may find themselves in those regions.
As I indicated earlier, we've got 4 chapters currently. There are some that are in the pipeline. We need to also celebrate the fact that when we went on the COVID-19, as in through lockdown, we found ourselves as an organization bringing down the borders within the various chapters, where because we are now online, we tend to have chapters hosting events for the national audience, as opposed to just their own provinces or their own chapters. What are the issues that they are coming up with? A host of issues that benefits the members, for example. Let's look at things like we've been, as an organization, focusing on the need to have credentialed members. Perhaps let me make a distinction. There's a difference between an ordinary member who has joined COMENSA in that basis, but there's also a credentialed member who is holding a designation that has been conferred by COMENSA. So we are advancing the need for all the coaches in the name of professionalizing the coaching profession, that each coach should also be credentialed. There are 3 levels of coaching credentials that we confer, which I can also safely say are almost in par with the credentials that are conferred by ICF, for example. We are also in the process, and is almost, and I need to emphasize, we are also looking at coming up with mentoring designations. There are 3 that we have applied for. The latest that I know is that through the process of SAQA, there's been no objection in those 3 being the recognized designations for COMENSA. We are also, coaches, looking at how best we can actually start ensuring that we mitigate the risk of relying heavily on volunteers. And this is where we are now saying perhaps it's time that we look at full-time employees that are dedicated for COMENSA. Of course, that comes with a whole lot of responsibilities. One of the items on the agenda for the board coming soon is to actually look at a viable structure that would ensure that we always at all times have full-time people that would be in the office. And our role as directors would be more strategic. At the moment, unfortunately, we find ourselves both operational and strategic at the same time. So you find the line very thin. So we ideally are looking for a situation where there will be full-time office bearers, but at the same time, the board will always be a strategic board that deals with strategic issues in any organization. I'll pause there for now, Sam.
But the chapters take national focus areas and then drill them down to specifics in their region. Is that how the model works, or is it guided nationally?
Okay, I should have explained that the chapters are the mouthpiece of the national office. Also, I should indicate that provincial chapters are not islands on their own. Whatever they do with a clear mandate from the national office. There is an interaction between the national office and also the chapter chairs. Let me also add the fact that the chapters, as they execute their mandate, obviously we have a forum where on a quarterly basis we meet, and this is myself and the chapter chairs, where we look at what are the things that are happening. How do we ensure that activities and events that are taking place are actually for the benefit of the members? At the end of the day, the chapters are at the coal face because our membership is at the chapter level. And that's why the role and the criticality of that role that chapters are expected to play in ensuring that our members are kept up to date with relevant issues, including ensuring that our own members are obviously capacitated and empowered in the process. Yes, Coach Sam.
Great. It's important for the viewers out there, those who want to come into the home of the coaches and mentors. The COMENSA and ICF coexist in South Africa. In fact, majority of us coaches have dual membership. So how is the collaboration going so far between the ICF South Africa chapter and the COMENSA?
I think let me make the following comments, Coach Sam. The aspect of dual membership between the two organizations is not a sin. It is a phenomenon that is happening anywhere international. I can give you an example. I was once a member of ICF as well, but there's been other bodies internationally that I have been a member. So it is not a crime where you find yourself in dual membership situations. Our collaboration with ICF South Africa has been an interesting development. It was on the 1st of November 2019 that we signed a memorandum of understanding between ourselves and ICF South Africa. It was valid up until end of December 2020. The question might be, where are we in terms of collaborating? I think in principle, we don't have issues between the two organizations. But also I can add that we will continue to explore the need to partner together, but also to identify issues that we can collaborate on. I can give an example. You have mentioned the issue of dual membership. It is important that as two organizations, we understand what that means without creating unnecessary tension between the two organizations. But you can also look at reciprocity of the two organizations in terms of the CPD points, for example. So that recognition is critical and important, particularly as the two leading coaching bodies in in South Africa. I can also add the third issue. The third issue being that I still want to maintain that advocacy between COMENSA and ICF in terms of promoting the strategic importance of coaching as a professional intervention remains critical. And therefore, as we partner together, we will also be exploring those. There is also a need for research between the two organizations. And maybe let me unpack the aspect of research. It is a common knowledge that ICF globally was established long time before the existence of COMENSA. So when I explain the dynamics between the two organizations about the local mindset vis-a-vis the global mindset, anybody who's operating on a local mindset would not be doing themselves a favor if they ignore the importance of a global mindset, because then you are well grounded in knowing what is happening globally, but also what is happening locally. I mean, at the end of the day, in South Africa, we say local is leke. So those are some of the dynamics we need to look at. It does not take away the importance of continuously collaborating between the two organizations. Yes, thank you.
Great. So I also wanted to ask, you're talking about collaborations with ICF and the fantastic strategic initiatives that you're taking up. So in terms of the global map, where do you see the presence of COMENSA, spreading its wings? Do you see yourself also coming to India somewhere and, offering certifications globally? So in terms of global landscape, what is the strategic vision like?
You have indicated India. We are partners in the BRICS, so it would be easier. I think the structures are already out there, so we can explore that easily. Let me share the following vision. It is the vision of COMENSA that at some point we would take essence of the fact that the borders are now down in terms of coaching. And therefore, the ordinary conclusion would be we need to start focusing continentally as COMENSA. But as we do so, we need to also not be limiting ourselves to just operating in South Africa. The implications obviously are there, because if you look at COMENSA as abbreviated, it actually says we are operating in South Africa. The next thing might be, let's operate in Southern Africa. That's a possibility. The next possibility is, let's operate in the rest of Africa. Those are dynamics that we will continue to look at and see how feasible they are in ensuring that ultimately we find ourselves in those spaces. We are taking calculated steps in looking at where next. But I can safely conclude by saying we do have an ambition of making sure that one day we will not only be operating in South Africa, we will be operating in the rest of Africa as an immediate objective. And if the need still persists, then look at the globe, because I still want to maintain that the fact that the borders are now down, I mean, we coach people from all walks of life in the whole world. And why not create that opportunity for COMENSA as an organization? Let me conclude, and I want to conclude by saying, when I compare ourselves to ICF, and in this case, ICF from a global point of view, I do recognize that they started a strategy of not only being national in their approach, but international in their approach. And therefore, time permitting, we will also be saying where to from here. Because I can also safely say there has been, and the members are there eager to start joining us and being part of us. So at the appropriate time, we will definitely extend our hand to them and start ensuring that system and processes are in place on those various countries that I've mentioned. But also, the fact that you mentioned India, watch the space.
Good. Great stuff.
Well
said.
So much.
Well said. Technology has broken down the borders. And I think it's almost like a necessity to make oneself relevant as a home of coaches in that context. So there is a additional country than South Africa that the COMENSA should belong to, and that is the globe through digital means. And everybody's trying to be there. We have a dilemma, Mokadi, in terms of coaching. The recent survey by ICF revealed that there is only 70,000 coaches for the entire world. That is a dilemma in my view, and I can confirm this from being running a coaching enterprise. That indeed we do have a dilemma at a practical level. You don't always get coaches as and when you need them. When you find them, they are also busy. And yet at the same time, there is a perception that the demand is low. So how do we manage these two polar posts? At the same time, and I think I can also say, as a male coach, I can also say that I've actually realized that I struggle to find male coaches. So that's the third dilemma. So what are we going to do as a professional bodies to grow as quick as possible enough numbers of coaches to deal with this demand? Because now everybody is realizing that, especially during COVID and post-COVID, that coaching is the most important and relevant intervention that many organizations and people need. I guess it's a positive problem, but it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. Let me start by saying I have read the ICF report that talks about the 70,000 coaches globally. I think there is more than that I want to submit. It could be the criteria used arriving at the number 70,000. I'll give an example of the situation in South Africa. We have a lot of coaches who unfortunately don't want to belong to a professional body. And what they actually do is they go out there and damage the image of coaching and mentoring because nobody holds them accountable in what they do. Is it a dilemma? Yes, it is a dilemma, because people would say you don't just belong to a professional body, and they raise a whole lot of issues about affiliation fees and so forth. The truth of the matter is that I'm actually happy to see that there is a development emerging from corporate South Africa. We are seeing that they would be specific in saying we don't just need a coach. We need a coach who is either a member of COMENSA or ICF, or who is credentialed by either ICF or COMENSA. I think that will bring a distinction, but it will also force those that don't want to belong to start realizing the importance of belonging to a professional body. That's the one comment to make. The second comment that I want to make is that the coaching landscape is littered with MBEs, masters by experience. They use the experience that they have without any formal qualification, including recognition and affiliation with professional bodies, as the basis of wanting to call themselves coaches. We need to be on the lookout, because if we don't help those brothers and sisters who are going out there as MBEs, we are creating a situation where damage might be created, because people might start doubting the authenticity of the coaching or mentoring interventions. So I'm saying we all have an obligation where we find and interact with people who are not yet members of professional bodies. Let's encourage them and make them realize the importance of belonging. I think that would be the comments I would want to make on the dilemma you're raising, Sam.
How is it in India, Coach Mishti?
So in India, there are a couple of coaching bodies, but ICF being the most prominent. And then there is Gallup, what I spoke about. So, so of course, it's very important that there is credentials, and there is also a surging demand for coaches in the corporate space. And especially after COVID, the first and the second wave, the conversation around wellness is really picking up at organizations where senior HR professionals are hiring coaches to help their employees deal with wellness issues and personal struggles, along with official struggles as well. So there's a definite increase in the demand for coaches. And I've mentioned this earlier, the chapters are very robust. A lot of dynamism, a lot of activities keep happening. And we will be getting people from those chapters, coaches, to this platform, as I've mentioned, Sam. So you'll get more details on that straight from people who are driving it. And it's a robust place. Having said that, what Mokadi was also sharing, there are a lot of coaches who, by the virtue of experience, come into the profession. But I would like to call them more as mentors rather than coaches. And somewhere it's important to have a very clear distinction between the two, because people start thinking that just by the virtue of being very experienced or from a mentoring perspective, if they're guiding people, that is coaching. But there is a clear distinction between the two. So yes, that is something else that I wanted to share.
One area that I'm of the view that is being neglected is the supply side of coaching in terms of education and training. And it's also an open space. A number of providers do introduce training based on where they come from, and there's quite a lot, and I think it's a good thing. But at the same time, I see the coaching bodies having to play a key role there as well, because if you don't address that, then you'll get what has just been explained, that you have people coming qualified from bodies that are governed somewhere else, and they offer coaching. And then those people qualified justifiably call themselves coaches. So I think there's backward and forward integration in terms of our involvement. And I think I see that as an opportunity, President Mokadi, from a COMENSA point of view, that it's actually an investment worth making to sit with these providers of training programs and coaching programs to influence their curriculum, because ultimately their graduates will come to COMENSA to become members and also then to ask to be credentialed. Is there any work in that area?
Certainly there is. I think the one role that we are currently playing as COMENSA, we recognize programs of training providers, and they are categorized. So there is the evaluation part, critical evaluation that goes into assessing those programs that are offered out there, and it is the recognition of those programs that we are currently doing as COMENSA, and extensively so. I just needed to also make a comment based on what Coach Mishti has said, if I can just take you one step back. I think one of the challenge is the fact that there seems to be confusion around what is coaching and what is mentoring. And until this confusion is taken out, people who are experienced and calling themselves coaches should actually be calling themselves mentors, as you rightfully pointed out, Coach Mishti. So I'm just saying we also have an obligation. All coaching fraternities have an obligation of educating the system. The system is vulnerable, and we can do much in terms of educating people. I'm happy to also say I have started to see a real impressive movement where corporate South Africa, and to a larger extent, I see also government entities, are starting to actually bring in the coaching intervention in their midst. And believe you me, I think they are well in the right direction of experiencing the strategic importance of coaching and mentoring. So we congratulate them on those bases, yes.
No, there's certainly the awareness is there and the desires there. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. But I've never seen a profession just solving itself, just left unattended and just solving itself. I think if you run a coaching enterprise or you are a coach, there is a spin-off in contributing to the evolution of that sector. And I think that is where bodies like COMENSA and ICF and others are well positioned. And one shouldn't be too much in a hurry, because evolution is going to happen. And because I'm seeing, and I wanted to add to the point you raised about approving and providers. I mean, you have a university provider network, which in reality don't need professional bodies, because they are regulated by other bodies for their programs they're offering. But out of interest into the market and out of professional to professional, they do want to say, okay, we are approved by COMENSA. We are university so-and-so, we're offering 6 months, 12 months courses. We are approved by COMENSA, and that becomes a value add. And I think because it's not a regulated industry, it requires diplomacy, advocacy, and it requires collaboration and motivation. And it might look like we are getting nowhere, but if you think of it, 10 years where we were and where we are today, certainly all these forces are contributing to something. And you and I and Mishti as well, we are also commercially involved. So you do get to see real challenges. And I think it's very important that in the right forums, they are brought up. Now, I want to bring a bigger challenge in, and maybe it's the last 15 minutes of our conversation, Mishti and President Mokadi. At the end of the day, South Africa is not an island. In fact, there's not even a justification to say we are COMENSA and we are only in South Africa. we are in Africa before we can actually think of South Africa. Of course, it just happened that historically our thinking is the other way around. I am very interested in the bigger challenge of the continent. I am told that let's put COMENSA outside for now because it's a South African-based organization, and let's look at ICF, which happens to be global, and therefore, as a result, it seems to be the only body that is having chapters in outside South Africa in Africa. And if we leave ICF South Africa, there's only 3 chapters. And if we add South Africa, there are only 4 chapters. So there's a strong business case to go into the continent, even if you don't call yourself COMENSA Africa. There's just a need, because South African companies are going into the continent. So what do you think needs to happen? And I know you are involved in the continental work. Because if we fix South Africa and we don't find ourselves present in Africa, we'll find ourselves having to catch up with the work that needs to happen in Africa. So we have to do both.
Okay. I've noted your question. I will respond. Before I do the response, I want to take you one step back. You had raised issues around universities and the type of programs it might be. Perhaps for a record, let me also indicate that as COMENSA, we have identified the need to have strategic partnership with universities for a simple reason, and the reason being part of their curriculum looks at professional practice once they graduate. And this takes me to the 2 concepts that are that are used interchangeably, and they shouldn't be. There is a professional qualification. There is also a professional designation. And a professional designation is conferred by professional bodies. The qualifications, obviously, it is the universities that confers those various degrees out there. So why am I raising the issue? I'm raising the issue that says over and above having qualified as a coach, there is still a need to ensure that a designation or a professional designation is conferred to yourself and you make a contribution to what actually is happening in the country, in the continent, and in the world. To your question about ICF being the only body at the moment that has chapters in most of the African countries, it is an undisputed fact. Let me start there. But having said that, it creates an opportunity for organizations like COMENSA to start saying, what contribution can we make in the country? What contribution can we make continentally in Africa? And also, what contribution can we make globally? I'll give examples. And let me start with the research example. Truth be told, that as COMENSA, we can make a significant impact to this country. And we can also, through research, evidence-based research, make a contribution to Africa as a continent. I still believe that there are massive opportunities for all of us as professional coaches, but also for professional bodies like COMENSA to actually start looking beyond and reaching out and making sure that impacts are created, not only in South Africa, but also in the neighboring countries. At the end, it is a fact that South Africa is a bigger brother, if you want to put it that way. And if that be the case, let us take advantage of those situations and start spreading ourselves with a view of making a positive impact to the three structures that I have mentioned. Thanks, Coach Sam.
Mishti?
For me, it's just very inspiring that the roadmap is so clear and it's strategic. So I think the milestones are very clearly defined. And I think it's with this clarity and focus, one can achieve a lot more. So, so for me, that is really inspiring. I don't have a question at this point, but I just wanted to appreciate that I see very clear milestones and great strategic focus. So just wanted to appreciate that, President Mokadi. Do accept my appreciation.
Now, there is quite a lot of issues that we raised that require follow-up. I think I'm just enjoying the conversation. I'm not necessarily looking for answers for some of the questions I'm asking. I just want us to trigger the thinking among the professional coaches and providers and the clients out there that this is the right direction that we need to follow. Mokadi, there is a perception in South Africa that we are in a leadership crisis, and it depends where you're coming from. And I think it's global. It's a global thing in my view. Leadership at the moment is being asked to step up. But let's leave the private sector leadership and let's talk about the state, public sector environment, starting from political leadership down to civilians. And you have just acknowledged the fact that there's more coming now, and it looks like it took longer to get to that point. Are coaches geared for this type of work? Do coaches invest some time in understanding the context? Because that is something that it's not just going to happen because you have been hired as a coach, and then you will understand it. So I will assume that there must be coaches within COMENSA that work purely with public sector, and such coaches could bring some more interesting perspective in terms of where the public sector is, vis-a-vis engaging coaches to support leaders that are appointed into this complex environment called political leadership or public sector environment. In your conversation with ministers and the government officials, what do you pick up?
Well, let me start where you say, is there a crisis in leadership? And you specifically want me to make a comment on political leadership, including, you said, the state. I think there is. And let me justify why I think there is. And there's still an opportunity at the same time. Let's be careful of leaders who say, please follow me, but excuse me, I don't know where I'm taking you. For me, that is where the crisis is. And as followers, we are quick to follow leaders who are saying, excuse me, I don't know where I'm taking you, but we still follow them. The inverse of what I'm saying is where we need to be saying, how do we identify visionary leaders? How do we identify transpersonal leaders who are not concerned about themselves and their cronies, but they are concerned about the stakeholders, both internal and external, that they are leading? Are there opportunities for leadership coaches? Certainly there are. And in fact, I can confirm that the majority of our coaches do obviously do some coaching in those environments as well. It will take time for people to understand why it's important that they look at personal and professional development in the context of leadership. You see, unfortunately, it becomes a painful thing when leaders, instead of appreciating that, they also have the opportunity to empower themselves and also to develop themselves. In fact, they see that as a sign of weakness when you admit that you need to be coached. There is this myth, maybe I must share. There is this myth that you would hear leaders who are saying in various cycles and sectors, who are saying, as my coach, I don't want the world to know that you are coaching me. Because the perception, therefore, is that, and they use the analogy that says, only a sick person goes to a doctor. So we need to demystify those things where people, instead of appreciating those opportunities, they see it as we.
Certainly. Wow, sure. We've come to the end of our conversation. It's so interesting. I think we can talk forever, and I think that's confirmation, President Mokadi, that maybe we need to talk more. Maybe we need to, because as we talk ourselves, there's a lot of some light bulb going up, and so there's always opportunity to change the perspective, perceptions, and everything that we have touched on. So, can we just reflect a little bit on what we have covered, starting with you, President Mokadi? What did this conversation bring to light for you and your team at COMENSA, or to you personally? What do you think what issues do you think we have raised, and what do they confirm, and what will you put forward as the next area of focus as a result of our conversation? I hope we did get to that point, that you are able to reflect a little bit. I know it was meant to celebrate you, but it ended up with us discussing the entire sector, but that's okay.
No, certainly.
Are you there, Mokadi?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Coach Sam, there are a number of opportunities that I think this conversation
I think we're losing Mokadi again. The network is failing us. You may want to reflect Coach Mishti and also check out while we allow him to reconnect.
Absolutely. Yes, Coach Sam, like I said, it was very inspiring. And what I really take home is the concept of transpersonal leadership, which is not only your external stakeholders, but aligning the internal stakeholders with the organization culture, vision. And how do you lead them? By creating a sustainable leadership, where one can inspire, one can motivate, where one can collaborate and take everyone along. And what President Mokadi said so beautifully when we were talking about crisis of leadership, he said that it's easy for people to follow people who don't have a clear vision, but then that is not really sustainable leadership either. So just having a very clear vision and to be able to convert that vision into reality is while taking all the stakeholders along. For me, that's a great lesson on leadership that I have learned without doing the several masters that President Mokadi has done. But I would definitely want to thank him for his time and sharing these valuable insights with us. Thank you so much.
We're back with you, Mokadi, for your last remarks.
I take that you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay. I said there are a number of lessons emanating from this conversation. The two key ones that I want to highlight. I think the need for a strategic partnership between COMENSA and ICF in South Africa is very important, and it needs to be explored. Number two, I think the conversation is now leaving me with an opportunity of saying, from where we are now, where to? And I think it is that question that says where to that I'm grappling with. And I would want to then check out with an appreciation of this opportunity to have the conversation. And that indeed we have touched the surface. There is always a possibility for another opportunity to have this kind of conversations. But also, let's make sure, within my own COMENSA, there are colleagues that are capable that we can also invite to have this conversation. And I'll be happy to facilitate those kind of interventions. Thank you very much for the time and the opportunity to share what I think I needed to share based on your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being our guest for the October edition of our Applied Professional and Executive Coaching 101 conversation. The idea is exactly that we raise issues and we make the entire world to provide answers. We don't claim to have all the answers. This is our humble contribution to the bigger challenges out there. But as players in the coaching fraternity, we believe that we can all make meaningful contribution. And Coach Mishti, thank you so much. As always, it's always wonderful to have your perspective in such conversations. We look forward to the next month's conversation. I think we're getting somebody from New Delhi, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
we will
I
confirm
that,
but we'll certainly have somebody from India sharing with us some insights.
Yes. Something very interesting coming up. So I'll share that with you, Sam. And another interesting conversation. And once again, thank you, Sam. It's always a pleasure to be on this platform and gain so much insights on coaching and the world of coaching globally. And once again, thank you, President Mokadi, for your time and the very valuable insights indeed. Thank you.
Good. We're saying goodbye to our viewers as well. That was brought to you by COMETSA Global Online Channels. We are developed, as I said at the beginning, on the concept of the idea, which stands for we inform and entertain, we develop and educate, we empower and support, we associate and network. That is the idea, and I hope we lived up to it. Until we meet again in the next month with an exciting guest from India, I'm saying goodbye and take care. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.